So my name is Jon Romano, and for those of you who do not know my story, when I was 16 years old, February 9th, 2004, I went into my high school with a shotgun. And obviously, I traumatized a lot of people. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured physically, but the trauma that many people carry 20 years later is still there. And I'm actually here with somebody who went to school with me. We didn't know each other back then, but you reached out to me a while back and you wanted to kind of be in touch a little bit.
Yep.
Can you tell us, why did you reach out to me? Why did you want to talk with me?
So I had seen that once you got out of prison, you were started doing some public speaking. I saw you on the news a few times. I knew that you were advocating for mental health, and I work in mental health services. And I was a student at Columbia High School, and I really wanted to know what you went through that made you go into our school and with a gun. I wanted to know what things happened to you, because I know I had a lot of trauma as a child, and I could only imagine what you went through that would make you want to do that.
Yeah.
And as a mental health advocate, I wanted to, my vision was to team up with you and become a force of advocates, and to really learn your story. And I had started healing way before I met you. I had done my own healing journey, and really thought about what it would take for someone to go into their school with a gun. And I believe that you had some type of trauma, and I identified with that. So that made the healing process easier, because I could identify with your trauma.
Mm.
Even though I didn't at that point know what your trauma was.
Yeah, because it's important to say that like mental health is not the cause, but it's an influence.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I tell people. There's no justifying it. And, there's so many people who experience mental health issues who never think about going and hurting somebody else. But there is that fringe group of people like myself who just think like, instead of it going inwards, I focus the pain outwards as well. But I love the fact that you're willing to reach out to me and talk to me about this
Yeah.
stuff. If you wouldn't mind, I think it's important to ask and to talk about, what was that day like for you?
Okay, so let's kind of start before everything happened that day. So prior to that week, I had been going to outpatient adolescent intensive therapy at Four Winds Hospital, because I was struggling with my own trauma, my own suicidal ideations, self harm. I was really going through it as a teenager, and transitioning from middle school into such a big, crazy high school.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going through a lot of my own stuff and not really focused on what was going on in the school, and with other people. So that day I was in German class with Mr. Roon Williams, who also went to my church. And he I just remember everything happening, and I didn't have a cell phone. And we go into lockdown, and the teacher goes under the desk and doesn't really tell us to. There wasn't much direction. He was kind of like protecting himself, it felt like. And I didn't have a cell phone, so I was like, trying to find someone with a cell phone. And luckily, one of my friends had a cell phone. And by the time I called my mom, they were already alerted that something was happening at the school, and to report to Goff. And I just remember, for me, as someone was suicidal, it made me think, like, I don't want to die this way. Like, in that moment, I don't want to die this way. I want to be in control, and I wanted to take my own life.
Mm.
But I didn't want to die from someone else's hand.
Mm.
And I didn't exactly know what was going on. It was terrifying and scary. And by the time we were all getting taken out, Michael Bennett was being taken out on ambulance and on a gurney. And I was friendly. I knew Mike Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up being one of my teachers after the shooting. But it was scary, and I didn't exactly know what was happening. And by the time my parents picked me up at Goff, they brought me right to Four Winds for my AIOP, and I was able to deal with that trauma pretty immediately.
Yeah. Sorry, one of my eyes is just suddenly like really
Yeah.
bothering me. Um, but yeah, so because the shooting happened in the South Tower, right?
Yep.
There was the South Tower and the North Tower. And if I remember from our previous conversations, you were kind of in
In the
between.
middle.
You were in that main hallway
Yep.
in between. Sorry, my eye is really bothering me. um, so did you hear gunshots or anything? No.
Nope.
Okay. And I ask that because I've had so many different people. Well, with social media and everything, I have a lot of people who come forward pretending to be a former student and saying things like, "Oh, I was in the cafeteria. I remember hearing the gunshots." And I was like, I've had friends who were in the cafeteria and nobody knew what was going
Yeah,
on.
no.
You didn't hear anything. Because it's got to be a whole different experience, I think, a lot about for the students who did hear something. I've spoken with a lot of people who've told me that, you know, you hear something, but nobody thinks gunshots. Everybody thought that because there was a little bit of construction going on, that something was happening with construction, or that I remember one of my old friends. They said that they thought somebody was like slamming a chair against the wall because it was like those metal walls. But yeah, so how I don't even know what to ask sometimes, but so you had a lot of issues at home going on at that time too.
Yeah. Yep.
How did your family respond to everything that happened?
To be honest, I don't quite remember. My mom has always, at least the later years, more toward the end of your sentence, my mom was very active in telling me that I should talk to you at some point when you get out.
Really?
Because she believed that we had a lot in common also.
Oh, wow.
And at that point, I don't think I was ready to
When
think
I was
about it. But
released?
you were, when you
Yeah.
were first released.
Yeah.
Because I had to see how it went. Like, I didn't know what would happen once you were released. I didn't know what the community's reaction would be. And to be honest, I'm so glad I reached out.
Yeah.
Like, I really am, because we do have such so much in common, and we have similar stories. Some parts of our stories are similar, and I still have a lot of blame for the school system, for both of us.
In what way? Could you elaborate? Like,
Yeah,
what were some of the problems that you had at the school as well?
So I had significant trauma growing up. I was abused, significantly abused child, and the school system, at every chance, did not give me the help and made me advocate so strongly, to the point that, like, my mom, who has her own issues, had to get involved and, like, really advocate for me, to get the help I needed, to get counseling, to get an IEP, to get ultimately removed from the school district and sent to a day treatment facility, to get the help I needed. And the day treatment was half school, half therapeutic. So we did, like, group therapy, we had individual therapy. It was a much more mental health based program that was allowed me to succeed in high school, whereas Columbia was too big. The teachers didn't really care about people. There was significant signs of trauma, and they did nothing about that, but, like, threatened to call CPS if my mom didn't take me to the hospital when I was suicidal, but, like, missed all the other stuff that led me to be suicidal. So I think the school system just really focuses on certain people, and the people that they think will succeed are the athletes and things like that, and everyone else is just by the wayside.
So what do you think could be improved? Like, how could they be more helpful to everybody?
Yeah, so implement more mental health supports in schools, starting in elementary school, all the way up through high school. I don't necessarily believe in police being in schools, But I do believe in more social workers being in schools and not just guidance counselors that are career focused, but people that are actually trained and want to help people that have trauma, that have abuse at home, that have alcoholic or drug addicted parents, that are going through assault, all those things that I was going through in high school that, no one realized.
Yeah.
Even though I was self-harming so much that like, how do you not know that there's something going on?
It's sad that you went through so much, and even after the shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a bit about, like, what was your experiences at Columbia after the shooting? What was the rest of your, school years like there?
Mm-hmm. So, the year of the shooting, I failed ninth grade. So I was in ninth grade. I failed ninth grade due to an attendance policy, which is ridiculous to me that I failed based on academically. I was fine. Attendance policy, I failed. I was in the school. I would just skip classes because I was so depressed that I couldn't, and anxious that I couldn't sit in a regular classroom. And there was no, at the time, like smaller classrooms or like things like that could have been included in my IEP but weren't. And so I failed ninth grade. The next year, I went to day treatment facility, and I was there for 18 months. And then I came back mid-junior year. Then my senior year of high school, my sister was a runaway. And she ran away, and it was a big, huge thing in the district. Like, everyone knew about it, and, like, everyone in school knew about it. And I was, like, harassed all the time, and, like, there was a lot of rumors. So I went into the special education office, and I told them that I will drop out of school and they will have wasted all the money that they spent sending me to a out-of-district placement if they don't let me do home study for the last 6 months and graduate on my own. Mm-hmm. And they agreed, and they did spend a lot of money sending me out of district, so they kind of knew that they, I put them in that spot. Mm-hmm. But I had to be a strong advocate for myself, because if I didn't, I would have dropped out and then not,
Some of the help that you were hoping to see just wasn't there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, like, as someone that, like, I was begging for help. Like, in all the obvious ways a teenage female would beg for help without, like, literally begging. Mm-hmm. And no one. Like, one social worker at Columbia that actually turned out to be kind of toxic helped me. And she ended up, when my sister she helped my sister run away, basically. Like, mm-hmm. It was, like, a very weird, she didn't, like, because I came from an abusive household, the social worker thought we'd be better off without our parents, and kind of helped my sister. And it was really weird, and my sister ended up dropping out of high school and being a runaway, and she's a lot better now. It's been 15 years, but just the school really, really failed a lot of people, I feel like.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad your sister's doing better now.
Thanks.
I'm hesitant to ask, but you've told me a few times as we've talked before that you were close with Mr. Bennett. Mm-hmm. I know nothing about the man.
Yeah.
I didn't even know I had shot somebody until later on. But the only things I've heard about him are good things. Mm-hmm. Actually, and this is something I don't talk about, but I found out that he's actually the uncle of some of my childhood friends who lived, like, this next street over from me. Like, we used to hang out because we lived so close. And it wasn't until probably 15 years later, mm-hmm. I found out that he was their uncle. But I wanted to ask, would you be willing to talk about what was it like having him as a teacher after the shooting?
Yeah. So he was a great person. He is a great person. I shouldn't say was. But he is a great person, and after the shooting, me and him got close because I was in a smaller classroom when I went back to Columbia, and he was a special education teacher that ran one of the programs for emotionally disturbed adolescents. And so I had him for homeroom, and I had him for a couple, like, study halls, and I think, like, maybe like a social studies class or something that was a smaller class. And so me and him would talk a lot, like one-on-one. And he talked about things in the shooting and asked if I was there and things like that. I remember him telling me about his anxieties and how he couldn't run as well at the time because of his leg. And he had been a triathlete, or he ran a lot. He did a lot of 5Ks and things like that, which at the time, it was 2006, 7 when me and him talked like this. So I'm sure he's more healed now and can probably run, and he's fine. But he definitely had an impact on me in high school.
Positive influence.
Yeah, definitely.
Good. I'm glad that he was able to do that. I know now that he's a superintendent somewhere south.
Yep.
A little bit further south than us.
Yeah.
I have seen a news article of him pop up after the 20th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen some things that I'm happy to hear that he's still, obviously with a lot of anxieties working in schools, but he's still able to do that. I'm happy to hear that. But yeah, so then I want to hear more about your journey from trauma, not just from the shooting, but you've talked openly about childhood trauma. How do you go from trauma to healing?
Yeah. So for me, there was a lot in between. There was, I graduated from high school at 18. I didn't walk the stage or anything. I just got my diploma, and went kind of off the rails at 18 with partying and drug use, and really my mental health was in the shitter, and I was not medicated, and I was couch hopping because I had really nowhere to live and not really a great job, and so at about 22 I stopped going to bars and I stopped using heavy drugs, and I decided I wanted to get weight loss surgery, and I had my weight loss surgery at 22 and lost a bunch of weight and found my first husband and fell in love for the first time, or what I thought was love, because it was the first time a guy was really nice to me after losing weight, and I thought that was love, but it wasn't. And then I think when I decided I wanted to leave my first husband was really the turn of my mental health, and deciding I wanted to choose me. And choosing me meant holding myself accountable and calling myself out. And for a really long time, that was super hard for me. And I chose not to do it because it was easier to pretend I didn't do bad things and wasn't a bad person. And I wasn't a bad person. I was just dealing with my trauma in a not great way. But so at probably about 25, 26, I really started to take that deep dive, go to therapy, take my medication, and think about all the things that have happened to me, and work on, they're not my fault, and it has nothing to do with my worth, the things that have happened to me. And other people have their own trauma, and how that affects me, I have to deal with that, and I have to deal with the choices that I've made that made my situation worse for me. And also I have to forgive people, because if I hold on to that, forgiveness is not for you. I mean, it helps me too. I don't want to hold that stuff in forever. I don't want to hold the pain. And understanding that the reason some things happened were because the other person was also traumatized and was coping with their own trauma and didn't know how to, cope with that trauma or deal in the moment, and they did something that they didn't mean to do, or that was a mistake. And understanding that gave me such a whole new perspective, because if I did things wrong and I made mistakes because of my trauma, why would I judge you for doing the same thing?
Right.
But we have to hold each other accountable. That's how we grow.
And I think forgiveness is one of the most powerful yet misunderstood concepts, because so many people believe that it has to do with the person who did wrong, For me myself, having been attacked, almost murdered myself, I was able to forgive my attacker pretty quickly because I had already gone through years of therapy, and I knew that me forgiving him wasn't about him. It was about me, like you were just saying, me letting go of everything. I don't want to hold on to the anger. I don't want to hold on to vengeance. People are like, oh, are you going to wait for him when he gets out of prison? I'm going to sit here and wait 25 fucking years, like stewing away. No, I'm going to live a good life. And whenever he gets out, I hope he's turned his life around, and I'm just going to keep on moving. But forgiveness is such a powerful and misunderstood thing. And I don't ask people for forgiveness because it's not something that you can like really ask for. You, as you talk about, you probably forgave me before you ever spoke to me, and you didn't even have to reach out to me and tell me that you could forgive somebody without ever talking to them and telling them that you forgive them, you know. But I'm glad that you've come at least to that part of your journey in life where you're able to, you know, not for my sake, but for your sake.
Exactly. Yep.
And because I imagine there's a lot of people who have forgiven me but will never tell me. They'll never talk to me. It might be too harmful for them to talk with me, to interact with me, and I completely understand that. You know, but I love that you've been able to come to this part where, you know, we always still have more to do, but we've come a long way, and I think you've come a long way. But I mean, like, how would you summarize the pathway to healing? Like, what is the best advice that you could give somebody on how to heal their traumas?
One, understand that it's not about you and it's never your fault. Two, it is your responsibility to heal. No one can help you. Or people can help you and support you, but no one can do it for you. You have to do it. And healing isn't bubble baths and like, as much as I like long drives with nice music, that's not healing for me. That's cathartic, but not healing. Healing is like the messy and the crying and the full of rage at myself and the realization that, you know, sometimes abuse people, and that, you know, hurt people, but healed people luckily help heal people. And I wanted to be a healer, and I didn't want to be a statistic, and I knew the only way to not be a statistic was to heal.
Can you elaborate for me? What do you mean by you didn't want to be a statistic?
So I score a 9 out of 10 on the ACEs assessment, which basically makes me a severely abused child. And statistically, people die early, usually by suicide or by overdose, or are incarcerated. And I didn't want to end up killing myself. I didn't want to overdose on drugs because I was an addict, and I didn't want to end up in jail. And I was headed down that path. In 2016, I had a near fatal overdose and attempts to kill myself. And since then, I've really made it my mission to want to live, and want to help people find the will to want to live and to want to heal.
So how do you do that? How do you help somebody find the will to live?
By allowing them a safe space without shame to tell their story, I think.
It's powerful to tell their story, because I think as you were talking about healing is also about getting all that stuff out by talking about it. Because I know for me, at least, unfortunately, I didn't do it until I was in prison, but talking about a lot of these things that I was going to therapy before the shooting, but I never fully opened up. I never talked about being sexually abused as a small child. I never talked about just how dark my thoughts could be. But the moment that I really opened up and just, like you said, told my story, told all the things that were going on in my life, all the things I've thought about, it was just a relief, as they say, the weight off my shoulders. And that, I think, is the biggest part of healing, is letting the shit out.
Exactly. And there's so much shame and guilt and feelings that make us feel like we need to keep that stuff in. And the only way to like get through it is to talk about it,
Yeah.
to let it out, to find someone that will listen, that doesn't judge you.
Mhm.
And you know, if therapy's not your thing, keep going through friends until you find one that you think you can trust enough to tell it to. Find new doctors, find new therapists, find find someone that you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, that's one of the things I tell people is you have to shop for a good therapist.
Oh yeah.
Because just because you go to a therapist and you have a couple of sessions and it's like, this ain't for me. No, that therapist isn't for you. You have to go and find somebody. There's different schools of thought in psychology and different approaches to therapy. You have to find what works for you, and you have to find a therapist who you just mesh with. Like, you can have a great conversation even if it wasn't in a professional setting. It's kind of like, oh,
Right.
this is somebody who's on the same wavelength. At least in my experience, that's how it is. And recently, after the sword attack, I went to EMDR therapy. But just my therapist alone, she was like, we had great conversations, and then we would move into the EMDR aspects. Um, but that's powerful. I tell people, it's like you said, go from friend to friend or whoever to whoever, and but also keep searching for a different therapist, because our friends can be a great source just for us to open out, vent to, but you also need somebody who can guide you. You know, it's kind of like going hiking, right? I tell people, when you're going on like a new trail, sometimes it's good to have your friends along. If you're going on a dangerous fucking trail, you want to have like that Sherpa who's trained, who's been down this trail 100 times before. They know where everything's at. They can guide you in safely. Um, but I mean, it sounds like you've been able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely. And like, I pride myself on being that person for other people, because I don't like, I recently had a staff disclose some personal things to me at work that she hasn't really told anybody. And it was because she's like, you're so open about things that I just knew that I could tell you this. And it was a big weight off her shoulders. And I got her some help that she needed and connected her with resources. But like, I am so glad that I'm able to like be that person too, and
Man.
just connect. Yeah, like connect people and like understand, and just no judgment. Like, I'm here. I will listen to you. I will sit with you if you're suicidal. I will, you know, I will get you into rehab if you need it. Whatever you need, let's talk. Let's sit down. Let's figure it out together, because, you know, not it took a lot of people to help me get better along my journey. Friends, therapists, doctors, medical providers. There were so many people in my journey that just helped along the way, that I'm glad that there's people like us that have, you know, changed our lives and are proof that people can change and people can do better.
Yeah. Now, those of us who've been through the darkness, now we're just trying to help others through the darkness too. You know, so I'm glad that you've gotten to this point in your life and you're able to make a difference. You know, because you are making a difference. That's what you just got to keep reminding yourself. And that's what I also tell other people is sometimes with social media, I have a lot of people, because I'm opening up and I'm sharing my story, I have a lot of people reach out and share their story with me. And sometimes it's even like suicidal, like teenagers. And I'm telling them, I'm like, you can turn your pain into purpose, which is, I know, something that you love to talk about. Whatever you're going through now, I was like, just think about your purpose is going to be help others through their pain. You know, you're going to become the person you wish you had right now in this moment of your life. Like, I wish you could find somebody who you could really connect with and help you through this. I'll do my best to be that person, but just think about it. You have a meaning and purpose in this life to now help others so that they don't experience what you're currently going through. And I think that's kind of how a lot of us is just turn pain into the purpose. Um, but yeah. One other question I have for you too, because when I talk about, I mentioned me being on social media, like I know that it's been kind of difficult and very controversial, me being on social media. Um, I think I started doing, you know, TikToks and stuff like 2 years ago. Obviously, my account blew up after I was attacked. Um, did you, before we talked, did you run into my social media stuff, or like, or what was it like for you when you?
Yeah, no, I enjoyed watching your videos in the beginning. I think if I remember, like when you first started, you didn't exactly say what the crime was, but you talked about being in prison and things like that.
Mhm.
And to be honest, that irritated me a little bit because I'm like, how are you gonna not talk about what you did, but you're on social media talking about being in prison?
Yeah.
And that was more out of like, people want to know.
Right.
Like you're on social media, and if
Yeah.
you're gonna put yourself on there, just put it on there.
You know what happened? I'll be honest. I made a video and I talked about the school shooting, and TikTok immediately, like, they process it, and in the processing suddenly it said nope, and it denied it. And so that's why I was kind of like, oh, I gotta dance around the issue. You know how people say
Yep.
like pew pew instead of gun? I was like, well, I guess I can't say like school shooting.
Right.
So the video that I made a video pretty early on where I said it was a shooting, but I didn't say school shooting because I was like, oh, TikTok's not letting me talk about this. You know, it seems like, I don't know if their guidelines have loosened up,
Yeah.
or because I've also noticed this too. The more followers you have, the more they let you get away with.
Yep.
I can say some things with, I have almost 300,000 followers, but if you only have 1,000 followers, they're not going to let you get away with it. It's a weird algorithm or whatever.
That makes so much more sense that you just explained that, because I was all like, I don't understand why he doesn't tell like what happened in the beginning, but as I followed it more, I just knew I like needed to reach out. And
I didn't even know you were following me from like early on.
Yep.
You know, I didn't know that. I thought it was more like recently that you had started to follow me on there.
No, I think well, this is also kind of funny and probably strange to most people, but I have a baby book that my grandma kept for me, and in my baby book is every article ever published about you. From the shooting until like your release and like things like that. So anything that was ever in the Times Union or the Record, she had kept, and she put it in my baby book, so I would remember things. But so I kind of followed you through your, you know, from the time you were arrested until you were released, and then I followed you on social media. So I've always kind of like been very interested, but I think it comes from a curiosity. Part of me is like, I wonder what, you know, what happened and what made him like this, because I'm very like, I know myself and like what made me like who I am.
Yeah, so it's kind of that morbid curiosity, because obviously I've had such an impact on your life with the shooting that then it's just kind of like, it's almost like a car wreck. You don't want to look, but part of you's like, no, I gotta
look.
Yeah, no, I can get that. Like my attacker, I know nothing about him. I know he was 42 years old when he attacked me. I know that he was homeless for, I think he told the police, I saw on the body cam footage, 2 or 3 years. But I know nothing else about him. Nothing. So I guess part of me, like if he was popping up in the news, talking about his life or something like that, yeah, I would definitely want to be like, okay, let me find out a little bit about him, and understand, you know, like you said, kind of maybe what led him to do it. Yeah, so I never knew that about you, but well, I mean, so what else? Is there anything else you think is important to talk about right now?
So like one of the things I wanted to bring up was like the dynamic between, right, you went through trauma and you had depression and like a hospitalization, maybe suicide attempt, right, as a teenager, and so did I, and how boys and girls get treated differently, like especially in the school system. I've seen it with a couple of my male friends that went to high school that weren't treated the same, and like I had to fight for help, but not half as hard as you had to fight.
Yeah, because my family and I, we were fighting to try to get me an IEP for a while. I had psychiatrists, psychologists, you know, some of the teachers at Columbia were supporting me, and for whatever reason, like, nope, I just kept getting shot down until my family got an attorney, and that was like the magic, you know, the magic button. But you had to fight, but not, you know, your family never got an attorney or anything.
Not as hard. We just really, I was very vocal with like, like, if you don't do something to help me, I'm going to commit suicide.
Mm.
And like, it was very blatant with the staff, the school psychologist and the nurse, and they had this little like treatment team at the school, and I was very blatant, like, something needs to give, or you're gonna find me in this school somewhere, not alive.
So you thought about ending your life in the school?
In the school, yep. There was a lot of times where I would go find a well, back in the day before the school was remodeled and stuff, find a hallway to sit in where there was no one around, and self-harm, or sit in the bathroom all day and self-harm.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point where I had threatened to unalive myself on a school social worker's personal home property.
Man.
And that's when they really took me seriously. Like, let's get this girl help before our teachers are involved.
Yeah.
And our staff.
And I would love to talk about that for a second, because, you know, I've done a lot of reading and research about suicide, and when people choose to do it in certain places, they're doing it to send a message.
Yep.
Like, I wanted to send a very big message.
Yep.
But I also wanted to terrorize people as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you wanted to, if you were going to end your life in school or on a social worker's, you know,
Yep.
you found out where they lived.
Yeah. Well, she gave me her address, which was kind of stupid.
Right, maybe crossing certain boundaries, but so you understand, because I've had a lot of people talk to me about this. A lot of people have told me about how they've thought about ending their life at work because they were just so miserable at work.
Yeah.
But so you understand that, like, sometimes people are just, they want to die in a public way to send a message.
Yeah, and I wanted people to feel my pain. I wanted people to feel my pain, but also, like, I wanted it to be disgusting, bloody mess, like, very, very much a scene. Like, I wanted it to be a scene, because I felt like maybe then they'll understand all this time what I've been going through. Maybe they'll get it. Maybe they'll feel bad. Maybe they'll blame themselves. And I was hoping that they would blame themselves.
That's what I was hoping for. You know, yeah, it's rough, you know, but yeah, I think you're making a difference now by being in the work that you're doing, talking with people the way you are, and even just connecting with me has been great. But so I'll just say thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you, because I think we can make an impact.
I think we can. I'll end it there.
Cool.